She donated her last savings of $2,000 to a veteran in need. 30 minutes later, an Army general arrived. Welcome to the History of Empathy channel. Today, we will tell the story of an ordinary woman who, by donating everything she had to a stranger on the street, set off a chain of events that no one could have imagined. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday. The sky was gray, as if the whole world were stuck on pause. Emily had just left the bank, where she withdrew the last $2,000 she had saved. It was her emergency fund, money she'd been scraping together for overdue rent. But that day, something shifted. She walked slowly along the wet sidewalk, the cold wind cutting through her worn-out coat. Her eyes fixed on the ground reflected not just worry, but a growing sense of helplessness. Every cent of that money carried weight. Losing it felt like losing the ground beneath her. Still, a knot in her chest wasn't just about the bills. Turning the corner, she saw a man crouched near the supermarket parking lot, his scruffy beard, tattered military clothes, and a gaze lost in the void. It was impossible not to notice. This man wasn't just hungry, he carried a kind of pain that defies words. Emily hesitated, but something made her stop. "You okay?" she asked, unsure of what to say next. The man looked at her with an expression hard to read. He nodded slightly, then looked away. Emily stood there for a few seconds, her heart tightening. Sometimes, someone's silence screams louder than any plea. "My name's Michael," he said quietly. Just waiting for this day to end, Emily knelt beside him, unbothered by the wet ground. She didn't know exactly why, but she felt she couldn't just keep walking. This was more than a random encounter. Between pauses and teary eyes, he shared that he was a war veteran. He'd returned to the U.S. with promises of support, but was swallowed by bureaucracy. No home, no help, with traumas that pills couldn't fix. He was ashamed to beg, ashamed to exist in that corner. Emily listened intently, without judgment, without haste. Each of Michael's words carried years of abandonment. In that moment, her own problems began to take on a different scale. The money weighing in her pocket now felt too light compared to the pain before her eyes. "How much do you need to get off this street?" she asked, almost not believing her own words. Michael let out a short laugh, like someone who no longer believed in miracles. "To get out, maybe $2,000 would get me into a shelter and cover basic treatment. But who's gonna give that to a guy like me?" Emily fell silent. The wind hit again, and she reached into her pocket. The envelope was still there, $2,000 counted out. She took a deep breath. Her mind screamed it was madness. Her heart said otherwise, and in that moment, she did the unthinkable. She handed the envelope to Michael's trembling hands. "This is yours now." His eyes widened, as if facing something impossible. "But you don't know me," he stammered. "I haven't done anything to deserve this." Emily just smiled, eyes teary. "You don't need to deserve it. You just need a fresh start." Michael began to cry. Not a loud or dramatic cry, but the kind that comes from the soul, when someone no longer expects anything from life. He held the envelope like it was a key, a chance. Emily stood up slowly and said, "It's gonna be okay. Now it begins." Without looking back, she walked away in silence, her heart pounding. Part of her couldn't believe what she'd done. Maybe she'd just thrown herself into the abyss. But deep down, there was an odd kind of peace, the kind that only comes when you act from the heart. 30 minutes later, Emily sat on a park bench nearby, trying to figure out how she'd explain this to her landlord. That's when she heard hurried footsteps approaching. She turned and saw 2 men in suits and a third in military uniform. She froze. The man in uniform had a stern but not cold expression. He approached Emily with respect, holding something in his hands. "Are you Emily Carter?" he asked. She nodded, confused. The soldier took a deep breath, as if he knew what he was about to say would change everything. "I'm General Thompson. We need to talk." Emily's body went cold. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. General Thompson extended his hand kindly, then handed her a card with an army seal. The 2 men beside him watched silently, their gazes sharp. "You met Michael earlier, didn't you?" the general asked. Emily nodded slowly, still clueless about what was happening. He's more important than you realize. We've been looking for him for months. Her heart raced. Why? What did he do? She asked, alarmed. He disappeared. After refusing a national honor, Michael saved 6 soldiers' lives in an ambush in Afghanistan. But after that, he vanished. He didn't want fame or help. Thought he didn't deserve it. Emily covered her mouth, overwhelmed. It explained so much. The general continued, "We heard what you did. He showed up at the base, envelope in hand. Said for the first time, someone made him feel worthy of living." The words hit Emily like a wave. She didn't know whether to cry, smile, or stay silent. Her simple act now carried new weight. "Michael wants you to come with us," the general said. "He wants to show you something." Emily hesitated, but something inside urged her to go. They got into an official car. During the drive, she stared out the window, feeling her life being rewritten by the second. It all seemed surreal. They arrived at an old military facility turned rehabilitation center. Inside, Michael stood waiting. Dressed in clean clothes, his appearance transformed. When he saw her, he gave an emotional smile. "You changed everything," he said, his voice steady. Emily smiled back, speechless. Michael led her to a small auditorium. There, veterans, officers, and press were gathered. They wanted to tell my story, but I only agreed if you were here, he said. Emily looked around, trying to grasp how this had escalated so fast. She felt small, yet oddly at peace. The general took the stage, speaking about heroism, sacrifice, and empathy. But to everyone's surprise, he didn't focus on the military story. Today, we're not here just to honor Michael, but to recognize a pure act of humanity. Emily Carter reminded us what it means to be American. She was called to the stage amid applause that left her stunned. With teary eyes, she gripped the microphone and said, "I just saw someone who needed help. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I felt invisible too." The auditorium fell silent. Her words touched everyone. At the end, Michael handed her a different envelope. Inside was a check the amount she'd given him, multiplied by 10. Emily shook her head, but he insisted, "This isn't charity, it's gratitude. You lit a spark I'd already put out." She accepted, tears in her eyes. In the days that followed, Emily and Michael's stories spread like wildfire online. Thousands shared, commented, and were moved. But for her, it was still about that moment she knelt on the ground and listened with an open heart. That would never leave her memory. Emily began receiving messages from strangers, sharing how her action inspired them. People who donated, helped, sought their own Michaels. She realized, at last, that real change starts with small choices, and each one could spark a silent revolution. One night, at home on her porch, Emily sat alone. The sky was clear, and for the first time in months, she felt calm. There were still uncertainties, of course. The bills hadn't gone away. But now, she carried something stronger than fear, purpose, something no one could take. Her phone rang. It was Michael. "There's a dinner at the rehab center tomorrow. I want you to come. It's a new tradition, gratitude dinner. It starts with you." Emily smiled. "Of course I'll come." And in that moment, she understood that the help she gave changed his life, but it saved hers too. The next night, Emily arrived at the rehabilitation center dressed in simplicity that belied the greatness of her presence. No photographers, no journalists, just people, stories, hugs. The gratitude dinner was a modest event, but heavy with meaning. Each plate served was a reminder of silent rebirths. Michael greeted her with a tight hug. "Tonight is about all of us, but it started with you," he said with a gentle smile. Emily looked at the faces around her, men and women marked by external and internal wars. But there was a spark in their eyes. There was life. It was impossible not to be moved. During dinner, a woman approached. "You're Emily?" she asked. "My brother served with Michael. He called me yesterday for the first time in years. Said you reminded him what it means to be human." Emily just smiled, trying to hold back tears. Words like that carried a weight the world doesn't see. After dinner, the small group gathered to share stories. Each tale was a punch to the gut, followed by a hug to the soul. Emily listened in silence, her heart open. Sometimes, the greatest help isn't in speaking but in being present. Fully. Michael spoke up. I never thought anyone would look at me with dignity again. I was a number, a mistake, a burden. But that day, she looked at me differently, and that was the start. Everyone applauded. Emily felt her face flush, her hands trembling. But inside, there was peace. In the days that followed, she started visiting the center regularly. She helped however she could, sorting clothes, serving coffee, listening. Each visit was an exchange. She gave time and empathy and received stories, smiles, grateful looks. Slowly, she became part of those lives as if she'd always belonged there. One afternoon, a young veteran named Aaron told her he'd been ready to give up before meeting her. You didn't talk to me, but I saw how you hugged Michael. That held me together. Emily took his hand and said, You matter, even when you think you don't. And he smiled for the first time in a long while. A month later, a national campaign to support homeless veterans was launched, inspired by Michael and Emily's story. Donations poured in from across the country. Small actions, big ripples. Her gesture, which seemed so simple, was now transforming lives in a real, collective way. Emily was invited to speak at the Senate about empathy and veterans' rights. Sitting before politicians, she told her story like she was talking to friends. I'm no hero. I was just human when life asked me to be. There was silence. Then a standing ovation. Laws began to change. Support programs expanded. Rehabilitation centers got more funding. But above all, society started looking differently at those who were once invisible. All because of an envelope, a gesture, a heart that chose to feel. Emily, who once lived on the margins of her own life, was now a voice. She didn't seek fame or recognition, just truth. And that truth was clear, genuine, good echoes, even if it starts small, even if it seems crazy, even if it hurts at first. She still faced struggles. Rent didn't pay itself, but something inside her had changed. She learned that peace comes when you align with what truly matters, and sometimes that takes the courage to leap without knowing where you land, like she did that winter day. Michael started working at the rehabilitation center, helping other veterans find shelter, treatment, and dignity. He told everyone, if Emily believed in me, you can believe in yourselves too. That phrase became the center's motto, written at the entrance like a promise. Their connection became a symbol, not of romance, but of something rarer, kinship, a bond born deep in the soul, enduring time, distance, and scars, a reminder that sometimes what saves a life is simply someone seeing another's pain. One ordinary afternoon, Emily walked alone through the same park where it all began. She sat on the same bench, looked at the sky, and in that moment of silence, she felt everything made sense. The broken pieces of her life had come together in a new way, stronger, more beautiful, more true. Months passed, the cold gave way to spring, and flowers began to bloom even on the city's most forgotten sidewalks. Emily now worked full-time at the Veteran Support Center. She left her old job to pursue what gave her days meaning. Every day, she heard new stories. Some were heavy with pain, others brimming with hope. There were tough days, silent tears in the bathroom, but there were also unexpected hugs, notes left on her desk, shy smiles that said more than words. That's where she felt alive. One day, a teenager knocked on the center's door. He wore an old cap and carried a tattered backpack. I heard you help people who've lost their way, he said. Emily invited him in. He wasn't a veteran, but he was clearly wounded by life, and she knew everyone deserves to be seen. The boy started visiting often. He helped out, swept floors, served coffee, until one day, he said, I want to be like you. Emily smiled. Don't try to be like me. Be someone who chooses to help. That's enough. In that moment, she saw the cycle repeat, kindness passing forward. Michael, meanwhile, was about to publish a book, with help from a volunteer journalist. He chronicled his journey from the silence of the streets to the stage of recovery. In the foreword, a highlighted sentence, This story exists only because someone chose to listen. Emily's name. Followed. At the book launch, the auditorium was packed. People came from various cities. Many didn't know Emily, but they knew her story, and that was bigger than any fame. At the end, an older woman approached, eyes teary. My daughter came home after seeing your video. Thank you. Emily learned life doesn't follow perfect scripts. There were still bills to pay, bad days, unannounced waves of longing, but she carried something unshakable, the certainty she'd made a difference, and deep down, that was the greatest reward. One sunny morning, she received an envelope with a presidential seal. It was an invitation. She'd be honored as an exemplary citizen for her social impact. She laughed alone as she read it. She thought of how it all started with an envelope in hand and a choice that seemed crazy. And now, another envelope surprised her. She declined the public ceremony. She asked for something simpler, that the government invest that time and money in centers like hers. She didn't want stages. She wanted change. And that touched the hearts of those following her journey even more. Her greatness lay in not wanting to be great. The center where she worked was renamed Emily's House. Not out of vanity, but by the insistence of the veterans who lived there. They said, when someone asks why this place works, the answer's always the same, because Emily was here. On the building's facade, beside the new name, a phrase was painted, kindness changes destinies. Passersby stopped to read it. Some smiled, others cried, but all, in some way, carried that message with them. And that's what she always wanted, to touch hearts. Michael and Emily remained close friends. Sometimes, they'd have long talks. On the center's porch, gazing at the sky. They spoke of the future, pain, hope. They were different, but bound by something immense. A connection born from a gesture that seemed too small to hold such power. One day, Michael looked at her and said, you know, you gave me $2,000, but what really saved my life was how you looked at me. Not with pity, just humanity. Emily didn't reply. She just held his hand, and in that silence, everything was said. She never sought recognition, never expected anything in return. She just followed her heart. And because of that, she touched more lives than she could imagine. Because true impact makes no noise. It happens in silence, in simple moments, in choices no one sees but that change someone's world forever. If you've made it this far, you might be wondering, would I have done the same? Maybe yes, maybe no. But the truth is, we all get a chance at some point to do something that seems small, but could mean everything to someone. This is the story of an ordinary woman who changed the fate of an invisible man and, without meaning to, the fates of many others, and maybe, now, it's changing yours too.